Mr. Chandrasekhar Iyer, Executive Director, 6th Energy. Can we please have a round of applause for all our guests? Mr. Sumit Garg, General Manager, Center for Railway Information System, Indian Railways. Mr. Umesh Bhatoria, CEO, Zempla. Mr. Venugopal Motkur, Senior Specialist, Energy, Niti Aayog. It is my honor to now invite Ms. Damini to officially open the session and set the context for our discussions today. Ms. Damini, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Am I audible? Thank you. We are a skinned and thinned audience today, but trust me, the topic is very, very interesting that we are going to talk about. The topic that we are going to touch upon today is what's in store, digital solutions for energy productivity and beyond. And you know, the world is talking about digital, the world is talking about productivity, the world is talking about sustainability. The context today reminds me of a very, very befitting quote, and you would have heard it yourself. Do more with less. And we are going to delve into with the experts on the stage in terms of how digitization can help us do more with less. But before I deep dive into the topic with the experts on the stage, let me read a quote by Robert T. Kiyosaki, and I'm sure you would know who Robert T. Kiyosaki is. He said, doing more with less is a crucial principle to learn, especially if you are going to be business in this ever-changing world. And we know with the chatter around artificial intelligence, we have all seen what happened in the stock markets earlier this week with the DeepSeek innovation that came out in the market. It is important that we rapidly and we proactively address the digitization topic. Why is digitization important? Because it becomes important in terms of measuring and then controlling things. At Schneider Electric, we follow a three-step approach. We first work on identifying what we can measure and what we can control, and we call it the strategize phase. We then work through digitization using the ecosystem to deliver results, and as a result, we become sustainable. So strategize, digitize, and decarbonize is the mantra that we follow to deliver productivity. I'm going to start now learning from the experts on the stage in terms of how we can move towards digitization and deliver productivity for the country. So we'll start with you, Chandrasekhar sir. The first question that I have for you, that you yourselves are a provider of software and IoT solutions. Okay, we would want to understand from you how through software and IoT solutions we can deliver energy productivity. And if you could explain this to us through a use case, through a customer use case example, then that would be of great value to us.
Good morning. Am I audible? Thank you very much. Firstly, thanks to AEEE for inviting me to this conference. It's an interesting opportunity to discuss about IoT solutions. And you mentioned about how we can enhance productivity, how we can enhance efficiency through IoT solutions and the digitization platform. I think when we look at IoT as a solution, then it encompasses the hardware sensors, the controllers, and the software platform where all the data comes and you analyze and you present it in meaningful dashboards. And this we do on web and on mobile apps. So sitting anywhere in the world, you can look at the performance of your equipment, of all your devices, wherever they are. So monitoring your device and their performance and looking at trends is something that IoT solutions enable. So in that sense, it provides visibility 24/7. That's the first most valuable piece that comes through. Second, you're able to exactly measure, monitor, analyze, and also control. You mentioned about measuring and controlling, but we also add monitoring and analysis to it. Then it becomes much more meaningful. And to talk about several use cases and examples, particularly from an energy point of view, for many years, I think we have been looking at energy efficiency as what more can be done using the same units of energy. But there is a lot more to that, and of course, recent discussions have been on storage as well. And there are a number of other devices that contribute to energy efficiency. So if you look at a site which uses various different sources of energy, then you have the diesel generator as a traditional backup to the grid. And in that, IoT again has a role to play. We deploy fuel tank level sensors, and we monitor the level of the tank. We correlate it with the DG generation and performance. And we are able to say if there is pilferage or incorrect fuel accounting. So that's, if you get that analysis in time and you take corrective actions, you can obviously save a lot of money, and you can bring greater efficiency and productivity to the whole thing. So in a 24-hour time frame, you monitor the grid, how much energy is coming from the grid, how much of DG is used, what are the units generated, and does it correlate well with the tank level change and the fuel consumption. And there is a huge amount of diesel pilferage, particularly if the sites are remote. So, and our use case is in telecom tower sites, and there are about 30,000 tower sites where our solutions are present. We're able to monitor DG performance, fuel consumption at those tower sites. The second use case is in battery health monitoring system. And typically you will find that to grid you have DG as a backup, and these days, because of sustainability, there is greater focus on usage of batteries, UPS. So battery health monitoring system is again a IoT solution that we provide. And it helps monitor the battery performance. Through deployment of sensors, we measure voltage, current, impedance, charge-discharge cycle, state of the charge. So two things are important. Just like humans, battery health is important and battery life is important. And when we say battery health and life, one, we are looking at how much is the battery going to last? How long is it going to last? That's one important thing. And usually what happens is when you don't monitor the performance and don't know enough about the life, which often the OEMs do not have enough solutions to provide along with the equipment, then you end up replacing the batteries even before its useful life gets over. So analyzing battery performance to know how much longer it will last is a very important parameter, it's a very important use case. You defer your capex and therefore get the best out of assets. So that's again enhanced productivity. And you also know that it's going to fail before time in many instances when you know there is high temperature, high voltage conditions. So knowing very well when your battery is going to fail, or knowing that the battery has enough life is a very strong IoT use case that we have. So DG performance, battery performance, other equipment performance like inverters, rectifiers, transformers are all very strong use case to understand how assets are performing and how productivity can be enhanced and how the life can be enhanced. So I think that those are some of the examples, and the more you get the data, if you have multiple sites, you are able to benchmark performance across different sites and then address the relative inefficiencies of those. And so that's how there are a number of ways you can respond.
Thank you. So if I have to just catch what you've said, you're basically saying that it is important that we monitor, we control through predictive analytics, and then as a result work towards asset optimization. And battery use case is a classical example that you've given. We've been working on that very actively at Schneider as well. But if I have to just extend that, right, because it starts from adoption. And if I turn to you, Umesh, I would want to understand that, how do you convince the customer to start on this journey in the first place? And what are the typical challenges or roadblocks that a customer would face in adopting such a digital solution in your experience?
Good morning, everyone. Damini, if one finds out a way how to convince the customer, I would have been a billionaire by now. So I'm still searching for that classic way in which how can you convince the customer. Much gratitude to Satish sir, and I see my mentor Padu sir over here. Good morning. It's last time when I was on a feed panel, I was called as the young man, and now I'm 40 plus, and we are talking about the same topic. So we must not be doing something right. I think with loss of hairs and some becoming gray, what I've realized in my experience is, and we've had this discussion with Padu sir, Datta Roy sir is not here. As engineers, we should always, I'm not an engineer, but what I've learned from engineers, working with engineers, is you should always look at first principles basis. So everything that we're talking about, if we continue to talk about technology, everything is means to the end. If the end is not defined, we can keep talking about the means, which means we'll sporadically get to the outcomes, which is going to be a case of a luck. So long story short, I think, I'm not sure if Arjun is here from Smart Joules. I think the only way the adoption of digital technologies and everything we're talking about is going to expand the way we want is when service providers itself expand it. We cannot expect industry, specifically the small, medium enterprises, to use these technologies because they don't have the skill set. So you can give them dashboards. It's almost like going back to my early days where my parents would force me to study. I mean, I could look at the books, but I could hardly gather anything. I mean, I could sit there, look at the book for an hour or two, but couldn't really figure out. So I think that's where I see the ball shifting. There are quite a number of startups and even incumbent companies which are now coming up with business model. Everything is becoming as a service. And that's where I would see that adoption itself would go higher. You don't need to preach adoption because that will be baked into your top line, bottom line of the services. Cooling as a service is a classic example in that sense. So the company that is providing cooling as a service will inherently use all of these technologies because they want to increase their margins. That's how I see. And I think you asked one question, sorry, I'll just probably extend. There was one question. I don't think all technologies are for everyone. What works for a large industry will never work for a small and medium scales or a mid-sized industry, and we have to take that into cognizance. So that's, yeah.
So basically, agility and customization is the key to increase adoption. That's.
I mean, I would say we need business model innovation. I mean, the onus lies on. I'm sorry to put you on spot. The onus lies on the likes of ABB, Schneider, Siemens of the world. And apologies, Damini, we've had a very good conversation up until now, and I hope that's how it remains after this panel discussion as well. We can't just sell them technology, promise the world, and not take them there. It's like, if you take the example of Elon Musk, he said that we could go to the moon. He took people there, or he's taking people could go to Mars, or he's taking people there. He's talking about, so I think that's where I'll probably take a pause, but if I were to summarize, the leadership has to come from incumbents, cannot be expected to come from industry. And when I say industry, the likes of Tata's, Aditya Birla Group's, Mahindras will always make the move, but they do not represent 80% of the industry in the context, so yeah.
Just to take you up on that challenge, right, I would want to invite the audience to come and visit our Hyderabad factory at Schneider Electric. It's a World Economic Forum recognized lighthouse factory, only one of the two in the countries. So we preach.
I've got to learn sales from you, Damini, for sure.
And we've managed to decarbonize that site. We've managed to reduce the downtime. We've increased water saving, electric saving, everything to the north of 50%. Wonderful. So of course we have a live example. We are very actively inviting customers, suppliers, partners to come and visit that facility and learn from how we have managed to upscale that and how we have managed to deliver that. So it's a classic reference, and I would invite you also, Umesh ji, to come and see that side. So move on to try and understand the lens that we have from a government perspective. And I'll turn to you, Mr. Venugopalji, to understand that, the government has a lot of focus on digital initiative. And of course, we are very actively building digital infrastructure. How this would promote the energy efficiency equation for India? If you could share your thoughts on this.
Yeah. I think firstly, let me thank IEEE for having me here. I think it's always important to understand before we talk about energy efficiency, what is happening across the broader macro spectrum. So where we are at today, right? India today stands at in terms of, per capita income at around $2,900. We are aspiring to become a high-income economy by 2047. And we also want to become a net zero economy by 2070. So how do we do all this while, how do we do this sustainably and energy, conserving energy and using energy much more efficient? Our Honorable Prime Minister has set kind of, some strategic directions in terms of how India wants to move. Now, I think that's the directions that, we would always, as, industry, academia, think tank community here, all should actually strive towards. So to just bring in some perspective, globally, when you look at what has happened in terms of GDP growth, or the growth in GDP necessarily proportionately translate into increase in energy demand, right? Because your energy intensity to GDP has been decreasing historically as well. Now, if you look at the case of US, it has been decreasing from 2000 period to 2022 by a rate of 1.7% every year. For delivering the same dollar income, you would now need less energy, right? And the predominant driver for this has been the energy efficiency, right? If we want to understand, unpack what is that I can deliver the same level of income, but using less energy. So the driver was energy efficiency. The technologies like decarbonization, everything has been talked today, but the fundamental driver or the first fuel, many of you in the community call it has been the energy efficiency. So, fundamentally, people thinking about how do I, give more bang for my buck, right? A lot of, especially when you talk about the options for our transition as we increase our energy because we aspire to become a developed economy, right? For example, let me give you an analogy. Today, our AC penetration in the current country stands at 13%, just 13%, right? Now, if we want to be a developed economy, we're aspiring for higher living standards, which would mean higher per capita incomes, which would mean people are affording to buy an AC if they can, right? So you would see that, this number shoots up northwards towards, 60 to 70, 80% going forward. With that phenomenal increase in AC load, how do I then make it much more sustainable and, much more efficient? Then talking about, switching from energy, delivering the same level of comfort, right? Can I do it much more sustainably and efficiently? So there are multiple aspects in NITI we are thinking about within a working group that we are actually been, AEEE is also part, and many of the partners who are here in the forum are part of. We're thinking about not just one solution, right? We are looking at a very integrated perspective about thinking about the solutions. We're thinking about passive building design futures, right? So delivering the same level of comfort, but without, increasing your demand for energy. So we're looking at passive design building futures. We're talking about low carbon materials or low energy intensive materials. We're talking about more energy efficient appliances, right? When you look at 5-star ACs in India today, don't necessarily are the global best technologies. So we're looking at how do we raise the platform so that we move up the game. So there are multiple facets when we look at, I've just taken an example of buildings, but this example is applicable across other sectors as well, right? Like when you talk about industry, where many of the panelists, have actually talked about using IoT, AI especially, to optimize their existing systems, right? So there are technologies like digital twins which are talked today, where you can actually use the digital technologies to understand where your process failures are, optimize it much better way. And with something like, DeepSeek, which has, in the news now in the last week, if you can bring AI at scale, at a rate, at a price, that becomes much more affordable for countries like, India, then actually you can change the game. And India is not, India is uniquely positioned. We have done it with fintech industry. India has built a unique ecosystem where the volume of UPI transactions, if you look at, are 170 billion. And Visa and MasterCard around 233 billion. UPI is just what, 5 years, 6 year old? And Visa has been there for ages. So I think India has a unique opportunity at this juncture, which I think we should capitalize on. And I think all the players in the room have to, contribute towards building this ecosystem. And I think let me just stop here and we'll probably iterate back.
Thank you, sir. I'll turn to you, Sumit ji. We've been talking about IoT, we've been talking about adoption. Venugopal ji gave us insights in terms of the opportunity that India has in terms of skilled manpower, in terms of resource capability, in terms of design thinking, and in terms of adoption. And UPI adoption is a classical example of how the country transformed its landscape on digital adoption, which is leading to energy efficiency. Railways has done, is implemented this through this unique Niantrak initiative. I mean, you are the spearheading source behind it. We would like to understand from you how the Niantrak initiative from the Indian Railways is helping us actually live and talk about energy efficiency and productivity from a railways perspective.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. And I have been having discussions with the panelists and other distinguished members here. But what I feel, because I am a railway officer working right now in Center for Railway Information Systems, which is the IT organization of railways. Now, what I find the major gap between the IoT initiatives or the software IoT, high technology things, and the actual field people who work at site, there is a lot of disconnect between these two things. For example, CRIS, where I work, develops a lot of IT applications for Indian Railways. You must have used PRS, UTS, voice. Then we have a lot of maintenance applications for the railway users as well. But the major challenge that we face is the implementation part, right? We develop applications, we develop IoT, we develop sensors, everything. But the challenge remains is whether the end user uses it or not, whether he gets some benefit out of it or not. For example, we prepare dashboards. There are a lot of dashboards available, people see it, we can see the energy consumption analysis, a lot of graphs, a lot of pie charts are shown on the dashboards. But what does the layman or the end user who is on the field make use of it? It's just data, it's just statistics that we say, but whether the country is able to make use of it or not, that is the most important challenge which this, I think, all of us face here. But again, coming back to what Indian Railways is envisaging, we have envisioned a net zero carbon emission target by 2030. So we have to be net zero carbon emission. And it's a very, very ambitious target. As my friend from Niti Aayog said, that the country's target is 2070, but Indian Railways has taken a challenge of achieving it by 2030. Now, all of you must have traveled in railways, and a lot of things are getting improved. But the major challenge remains what goes behind all what you see. What are the processes, what are the procedures, what are the systems? We have to work in a government setup and make revenue also, and earn revenue also from that. So that's the major challenge that we face. And in turn, we are asked to be energy efficient. We are asked to reduce our energy consumptions, go for new IoT initiatives and all that. But what relevance does it make to the end user? That is the gap which I think we all need to focus on. There are a lot of industry people here, a lot of government people here, a lot of end users as well. But we need to understand, see, it's very easy to talk on broad, major things like we are having a discussion like. But when you get into the nitty-gritties of things, if you take even a simple example of a pump, for example, we are working on IR Niantrak applications, so there we are going for IoT implementation on pumps. Now, getting that implemented in an organization like Railways is a very, very big challenge. Because we have, technicians, khalasis, who are not so educated, who work in the field day and night. They are very hard workers. But they don't understand the nitty-gritties of all these things. Now, I provide them a tablet or a computer which shows all the dashboards, but whether the end railway user can make something out of it or not, that is where we need to focus on. We go there on the field, we tell them, bhai, dekho, you will get this here, the energy graph is here. You can compare these two graphs of different makes and models of pumps, and you can compare yourself with the other railway, how other railways are doing, and you can adopt the best practices or adopt the best products. That is very understandable, as Mr. Chandrasekhar also said. But again, the point remains is whether he really wants to do it or not. So that is the challenge we face at the start of launch of any initiative. And that is the challenge we are facing in IR Niantrak application, which Damini talked about. So I'm happy that people are at least coming to know about the IR Niantrak application and take it as very good opportunity to tell you about that IR Niyantrak application. So it's basically an IoT-based application which is used for monitoring and control of various assets on Indian Railways. We have started with escalators, lifts, pumps, lighting at stations. Then you must have seen there is 30%, 70% segregation of lights on platforms. So 30% lights are always on there in the night for safety reasons, and the remaining 70% lights get on and off based on arrival and departure of trains. So all these things are now getting automated slowly and slowly. But again, see, being from the railways, working in an IT organization, I act as a bridge between the end user and the IT applications which are developed by the software engineers. Now the major challenge is कि भाई वो जो फिटर खलासी फील्ड लेवल पे है वो मेरे को फ़ोन करता है, सर ये ज़बरदस्ती ऑन ऑफ हो जा रही है लाइट्स, अब मैं इसका क्या करूं सर, आपने मैनुअल सिस्टम बाईपास कर दिया है और वो आपका जो सेंसर है वो उसको ऑन कर दे रहा है लाइट्स को, जबकि यहाँ ज़रूरत नहीं है। हमारे यहाँ GM साहब का इंस्पेक्शन होने वाला है और सारी लाइट्स ऑफ हो गई हैं। So I mean, you need to, I would request the industry to please work at the ground level. That is very important. What we do is we have a lot of PhDs, we have a lot of researchers who know all the nitty-gritties of the technology. But when it comes to implementation at the ground level, you first understand what the ground people want and then develop your technology. Another project that we are working is on the GPS project. We have to install GPS devices on all the railway wagons of Indian Railways, you know, for real-time monitoring and tracking of where your wagon is. But again, what I find after 1 year of working on this project is that the Indian vendor ecosystem, they collaborate with the foreign partners, they have the best of the OEM inputs, but again, a lot of communication gap is there between the system integrator who comes to us and the OEMs like Schneider, L&T or any other big OEMs or even the foreign players. There is a lot of communication gap between the system integrators as well and the OEMs themselves. So because we come in front as railways to the system integrators, OEMs, technical people, the technical brain is always behind the scenes. And perhaps they don't understand what actually the requirement of the field is. So there we need to bridge the gap, and there we need to delve into nitty-gritties of things. So I think that's all from my side. So I mean, I was a little passionate about it because right now I'm facing these challenges. So I mean, I'm also excited because it gives a lot of opportunity. This forum is wonderful because at least you people come to know what Railways is doing. We come to know what you are doing. But it is always important to get into the details of things and bridge those gaps. So that is what my request would be.
Yeah. And I'll share offline with you in the interest of time. And I know, Umeshji, you want to make a comment. But I'll share with you offline, Sumitji, what we are doing in terms of actually building energy productivity use cases at the ground level, starting with the farmers, moving it to underprivileged communities, and then taking it up to tier 2 and tier 1 cities. So we can have an offline conversation on that. But Umeshji, you would want to make a remark here.
And apologies, few things I'll say in Hindi just because sir ne khalasi ki baat ki. So you're absolutely, you hit the nail on the head, and that is what I've been trying to explain and also learn, that when we look at the end outcomes, everything we do makes sense. उस सिचुएशन को मैं बस प्लेबैक करना चाहूँगा कि रेलवेज बोल रही है हमारे पास लाखों पंप्स हैं, हम चाहते हैं कि वो उनका अनप्लान्ड डाउन टाइम नहीं हो और एफिशिएंसी सही तरीके से रहे। अब स्टेक होल्डर्स काफ़ी सारे हैं, तो होना ये चाहिए सर कि IoT वाईटी जो लगा हुआ है उसको जो एनालाइज करना है वो करके खलासी के पास जो भी वो टैबलेट लेता है वहाँ पे ये जाए, कृपया शाफ्ट चेंज करें, कृपया कैपेसिटर चेंज करें. That is what needs to happen. Everything else in between does not matter. And we've seen this. So how many of you use glucose monitors now, which have come, like a lot of people, you would see videos on Facebook and others, right? That is inherent change that's brought in. It's like once it tells me that my glucose levels are increasing beyond the capacity if I'm eating something, the next obvious thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change and I say, okay, I'm not going to eat it. So similarly, when we look at the end technician, and this is not an India problem, is actually a bigger problem because of the languages people speak. We have multiple languages. The problem is not of the same magnitude in developed economies because English is the default language. So it's easier. However, one last point, Amini, and I'll promise I'll give you back.
The question is to you, so you can continue.
Okay. Sir, आपने बोला था cost of AI. In my company, Exemplar, for the last 4 months, we've been using OpenAI's API calls. एंड सर हम यही करते हैं बड़ी इंजीनियरिंग कंपनीज के लिए. तो यूके में यूरोप की सबसे बड़ी जो हेल्थ केयर फैसिलिटी है मैनचेस्टर हॉस्पिटल कॉम्प्लेक्स, उसके 15,000 एसेट्स हमारा प्लेटफॉर्म एनालाइज करके मॉनिटर करके ऐसा सिंपल सा वर्क ऑर्डर जनरेट करता है विदाउट समवन लुकिंग एट अ डैशबोर्ड. And that's happening as we speak. But the last point that I wanted to say about the cost of using AI, we make almost not a high number of calls, but my total spend on using OpenAI API calls is not more than $100 for the last 4 months. Imagine. It cannot go below that. I mean, it has gone to a level where it makes economic sense to do it today. If we are going to wait for it to go further down, it will just add to margins, but it's already got to a point, AI via open source also has got to a point where we cannot have genuine reasons not to implement at scale. Thank you.
But I'm coming back to you, right? Since you so passionately spoke about how Zempla is, building use cases and examples.
मैं देखा मैं भी थोड़ा सेल्स कर लूँ यहाँ से, अगर सर बुला
मैं-
लें
मैं
बोलते
एक
कि
और-
उमेश जी आ जाओ आप सॉल्व करो हमारी प्रॉब्लम तो.
One more opportunity coming down your way. What future innovations then you are seeing in this IoT space? And then what specifically, if you can talk about it openly in terms of Zempla is working on, in terms of building and bringing this equation further and forward? And the equation that we're all talking about is, of course, energy efficiency.
And anyone who's like, I would highly encourage people, if you are going to search for Zempla, there's a dedicated page on About Us where I talk about why I am passionate about this. I've been an average student in my academic qualification. Padu sir has seen me grow and he's known I've been an average individual. So what has helped me to come to this stage is you will find number of people who will be able to, I'm coming to the answer. So number of people who will be willing to help you. And second, there's a lot of information and tools available on the internet which can help you become better if you really would want to. So joining the dots, I am really excited about technology overcoming the challenges that Sumit sir has absolutely nailed. How do you simplify it to that extent कि यूजर की लाइफ ही नहीं बदल रही है, उसको फर्क ही नहीं पड़ रहा. And until unless that happens, it's not, and that's what I'm personally excited about, that a lot of people are working. I don't think it's not just Zempla. There are a lot of companies who are working on it and saying, why do we even need dashboards? Why do we even expect a technician who's not even a diploma holder to look at a graph and say, अब तू decide कर दे को क्या करना है, या वो होने वाला ही नहीं है. So that is what I'm excited. Everything else technology change होगी. वो अभी every one day we have a new model coming in. I was the other day, someone was talking about Industry 5.0. There's a LinkedIn thought leader, Jeff Winter. He's now starting to talk about Industry 5.0. We might get 7, 6, 8 in that sense.
4.0 के adoption की बात करें.
Exactly. So point यही है कि if we can, and not being a critique, but something from the experience, if we can focus a lot of our channel and energy on the outcomes, I think everything will fall in place. So if we can do that, and if people from here could take that one takeaway, I would say let that be the takeaway. I'm sure when you come back to this conference a year later and then say, okay, how many of you implemented that? There'll be many case studies. We'll actually be, instead of having a panel discussion, having demonstration of case studies and saying कि इस तरह से use किया गया है. वो बहुत फायदा देगा. तो वो चीज़ है.
Thank you. Just to relate to that, right, Venugopal ji, I want to ask you a question. What Sumit ji and what Umesh ji spoke about is, when we are talking about digital solutions and energy efficiency, it is important that we create something which can be adopted and accepted by a layman and the entire ecosystem without really altering my life materially. Okay. From what we see from a government perspective, there's so much focus on renewable energy and especially scope 1. So everybody is like in the race to at least work on the scope 1 emission, which is direct energy supply. And as a result, this whole communication and chatter about what can be actually done already in your operations, what can be done in terms of digital adoption at the grassroots level, that's sort of neglected. And there are, of course, a lot of debates around that. How do you feel about this topic? Do you feel that this whole push on renewable energy and this whole push on scope 1 emission, that is compromising the energy efficiency story from a demand side?
No, I think especially in the case of India, I don't think that's the case. I think if you look at phenomenally, we have a Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Under its stewardship, we have like implemented tremendous number of schemes, right? We have performance achieved treat scheme. We have standards and lighting scheme where you have actually star rated all your appliances. And now you're changing those star ratings to have higher appliances standards. And you have LED schemes, which have now revolutionized the kind of an energy savings. You have cities which have come up, which have completely put up LED street lighting and saved up to 30 to 40% energy savings. So I wouldn't say that India, at least is in the case of India, that we are choosing one over the other. But as I said in my previous remarks, energy efficiency is more in the money today, right? For talking about some technologies which are needed for far net zero 2070, we're talking about technologies like CCUS, small modular nuclear reactors or anything. Those are not in the money today. The technologies which are in the money today, which can deliver returns to the industry player, or give better acceptance to the end consumer, are the energy efficient instruments or the energy efficiency initiatives. So I see that, as I talked about multiple initiatives cutting across sectors, I think we are looking at energy efficiency as a first choice that we would make in many of these industries. For example, in buildings, we would talk about changing the building design itself, or in case of transport, we're talking about fuel efficiency standards. In case of industry, we're talking about the technologies that we talked about, IoT, AI. I think what is most important and what is the most, I think, where India has actually started talking about is need for a unified energy interface. Like UPI, where we have built in an interoperable open platform which can enable peer-to-peer network, peer-to-peer data sharing and everything. What we need is such an adoption within the energy sector as well, which has not taken scale in India today. I mean, we would want the unified energy interfaces to connect, because when you especially look at the energy sector, you have DISCOMs, you have renewable energy generators, you have consumers, and then you have OEMs and everything. If everyone works on their own proprietary platforms, and everyone has to probably interact using, again, a specially designed APIs, right? So they can talk to each other. It becomes very complicated mess. We have done in this in case of fintech, I think, and now there is some work that is being done starting with EVs, especially to discover the EV charging infrastructure using unified energy interface. So I think that is what is fundamentally needed for energy sector to adopt, to drive scale, especially when it comes to to measuring what is the wastage, how do we optimize it, where do we reduce it. Now if you look at the other initiatives that are happening in India, right, we are actually talking about replacing 250 million old meters with smart meters at homes, right? That's the scale that India is bringing. No other country has done it. Now imagine if smart meters can come in, right, and you have these intelligent something like UEI, Unified Energy Interface, which can facilitate multiple data sharing across multiple players. The consumers can optimize behavior. The consumer can change their behavior, motivated to change their behavior. And I think this is what is needed when our Honorable Prime Minister talked about Mission Life, right? So how do you change your lifestyle for environment? Can I shift my load to, to other times, right? If I can operate my washing machine in the night where the load on the system is less compared to a daytime. So those are, I think, some small things, and that can happen only when we build a platform at scale. India has done it with UPI. I think India can do it with UI. That's my big bet.
Thank you. Just on that last point, and I would want to just compliment on that. We at Schneider, we've introduced a platform called Visor, which is for home automation, and just building onto that, it gives active statistics for a home user to read their energy consumption and gives push notifications around, this room's AC is burning more energy than usual. You would be better placed if you are running your washing machine at this hour or your fan at this hour. And it helps you to play with TOD and monitor energy consumption at the end user level itself. So just thought of adding that particular point. Coming back on the adoption topic, and I would want to take your thoughts, Venugopalji, as well as Sumitji. We'll start with you, Venugopalji. One of the biggest barriers that we think comes to adoption, that's the general mindset, is that, you know, digital solutions are always expensive. And that's a mindset that we are trying to break and deal with. How do you feel about it? Do you come across this hurdle in your day-to-day equation? And then how are we working, you know, through your solutions to make technology accessible to everybody?
I think you brought up a very interesting question. And to respond to that, I'll like to break it up into two parts. One, understanding the technology better, and particularly addressing the myths and misconceptions around the technology and how it works. Just putting a IoT solution doesn't mean that you can get everything. It's not a magic, right? And particularly there are technical challenges in how you integrate IoT devices with the field situations. IoT sensors are supposed to work in very adverse conditions, maybe negative 10 degree to 70 degrees centigrade, difficult temperature conditions, different environment conditions of dust being there, windy conditions, and in all this, the sensors have to work. And we expect a lot, but we are not willing to, you know, give the true price for it. That's a common perception, and an understanding needs to come. So there are actions required both from not only the industry point of view, but also the user perspective. The second important challenge we often face when we are asked that why is it so expensive is because people don't relate it to the value that it can create. I mentioned about the value that comes from savings of diesel or better use of battery. And there are a number of other IoT solutions that are very relevant, and one needs to measure in terms of the value that it creates. So, for instance, safety, security. Can you put a value to that? Avoiding accidents. Can you put a value to that? So when you look at the value, really speaking, you are able to, you know, relate and then say that, okay, I really can afford it. It will save me a lot more. Production losses, right? It's huge, and IoT devices and solutions can help address that. But from a solution provider perspective, the way we, of course, we go about measuring and giving ROI metrics and explaining the value that we bring, but we also tell consumers to look at use cases beyond what they have already thought. So if there is an energy efficiency use case, there could be a water efficiency use case in the same premise. And if you use a common controller, which can capture data from two different use cases, the whole investment becomes more cost effective. So I think that's one example of how we can make it more cost effective. The second is addressing scale. Multiple sites, deriving data from multiple sites, implementing it multiple sites, and using a common cloud platform for analytics could be again a very cost effective way of bringing the solutions to the customer. Industry participants can come together, form a cluster, and we have seen this in renewable energy, in energy efficiency imperatives, and every time we talk about how can we get a cluster together to implement, the same could be done for technology solutions as well, right? So that's another way of making it cost effective. And finally, I think what is important is from a solution provider perspective, we provide financing solutions in terms of OpEx models that can ease the burden, the upfront investment from the users. So those are a number of ways in which we can make it more cost effective, but most importantly, the value needs to be understood and the context in which the sensors operate. Sumit ji mentioned about the problems that we face in day-to-day life. Equally, there are issues that arise from use of sensors which are not good quality, right? There are false alarms, and there are a number of them, and you run and see, but the alarm doesn't exist, or the problem doesn't exist. So a number of false alarms are generated. So you have to use sensors of the right quality and of the right type for a sustainable, robust solution. That's all that I would say.
Thank you, Venugopalji. Sumitji, coming back, Chandrasekharji, my bad. Coming back to you, Sumitji, from an Indian Railways perspective, how are we incorporating, this energy efficient solutions in some of the customer facing services that we have? And again, linking back to your point, without driving behavioral change for the users, but then working through the system integrators and still building a high-end energy efficient solution.
So what Indian Railways does for customers as far as energy efficiency is concerned, there are a lot of things which have already been done. For example, all the stations, all the coaches, everywhere lights, wherever you see, those are all 100% LEDs. So I think Indian Railways is the first organization to achieve this in such a mammoth scale. So, I mean, there are around more than 8,000 stations, more than 5 lakh quarters where railway employees live. And the energy consumption is in the range of more than 20 billion units when it comes to traction and non-traction. Non-traction would constitute of around 2.5 billion units per year. So, I mean, around 20 to 25% energy was just saved by adoption of this LEDs on such a massive scale. That is one example of it. The second is BLDC motors are being used. Now, increasingly, BLDC adoption is there. And if I come to traction, we have 3-phase motors. So, I mean, all these such efficiency measures have been already taken by railways. We have already achieved nearly 100% electrification. And that was a major challenge because you must have seen diesel locomotives, electric locomotives. Traction change was a challenge, and that used to, consume a lot of fuel. But now we are near 100% electrification has been achieved, and that was one of the strategies, the first topmost strategy for achieving net zero carbon emission by 2030. The second is phasing out of diesel consumption. So now diesel locomotives will only be used for emergency purposes. For example, if there is any grid failure or just for shunting of wagons or coaches, if any locomotives are required, then diesel is more efficient, and then we'll be going for that. And then energy efficiency is the third strategy for achieving net zero carbon emission, where we need to save on the energy consumption and where IoT initiatives and AI and ML, all those things are coming. And last but not the least is the offsetting of whatever little bit of this, CO2 emissions are there, that they have to be offsetted by plantation of trees or whatever mechanisms railways work out. But now these 4 strategies are there to achieve that net zero carbon emission. And coming back to the expense that you were talking of, that's a very interesting topic, because when we do tenders in government sector, there are a lot of challenges. Again, as I just said, that there is a lot of disconnect between the actual field thing and the OEMs and the vendors who come to us. Now, bridging that gap is very important. And once you understand what is actually required, then we can go for economy. Because what we practically see is when we ask for budgetary quotations from vendors, they don't understand what we actually require, or maybe we are not able to communicate with them. So without realizing what actually the requirement is, we get the budgetary quotes from the OEMs, from the SIs. They don't understand what actually we want. And these are, and when we try to implement it, when the tender is in the final stages, when the financial bid is opened, and when we see and when we tally, there is a lot of difference in the budgetary quotations or in the financial bids that we receive. Now, that's why most of the tenders in government sector, especially the technology tenders, new technology tenders, they get discharged or they are not able to finalize, see the light of the day. The main reason being is that due diligence was not done in the initial stages of the framing of the specification or in the framing of the tender. Now, as officers of the government officers, people normally think that perhaps there is some, there is some delay, there was some gap from the government side of the things. But I would like to bring to your notice that equally responsible is the vendor ecosystem of the country. Because nobody was stopping them to actually understand what the site requirement is. For example, talking of the IR Niyantrak application, where the software part is being developed by CRIS, and the field devices, sensors, actuators, IoT gateways, IFDs, aggregators, whatever you may call it, those tenders are being done by the railways themselves. Now, railways don't understand what actually is required, and we have requested vendors who were there in the initial POC stages that you please go to the railway officers, the railway supervisors, the technicians, the khalasis, and make them understand, or you understand from them what is their requirement. But there is a huge gap, huge disconnect between what the railways end users want and what the vendors are giving their budgetary quotes as for to the railways. Now that is what we want to appreciate, that please go to the site, go to the field, understand what is actually required. I know there are a lot of challenges. People at the field might not entertain you, and that challenge you people must already be facing. कि भाई वहाँ जाते हैं तो साहब कभी वो छुट्टी चले गए, कभी वो इंस्पेक्शन में बिजी हो गए, वो यहाँ चले गए, उनको वहाँ बुला लिया गया, एंड यू डोंट गेट द सपोर्ट. बट आई थिंक दैट इज द मेजर पेन पॉइंट दैट वी नीड टू एड्रेस as this IoT community. Because until and unless you understand the field issues, you get in touch, you communicate with those people, the expense of the solutions, technological solutions, is always going to be high. Similarly, if I talk about the software licenses that we get from the OEMs, now again there is a huge disconnect between what the OEMs want to sell and what we want to take. As OEMs of whether it's the hardware products or the software licenses, I mean, I would be rude sounding it, but normally the OEMs want to sell what they have without understanding what actually the consumer wants. So if you have a collaboration with a European partner or a US partner, so normally they design their products as per their local requirements. Now you collaborate, you make a consortium or a joint venture with that partner, you take that product and want to sell in India. Now that is not going to work with us. So that is very important to understand. And the major gap is the Indians don't understand it, what they actually want, and the vendors who want to sell, they don't understand what actually the users want. That's why the cost goes enormously high. What we could have done in, say, 10 crores is normally done in 100 crores, and that also fails over a period of time. So I would like to request this August audience that please understand the user requirement and make the user understand what they actually require. Because users also don't know what they require. I mean, it's like you are trying to sell what you have without making the user understand what they really want. That is the major challenge that we face.
Yeah, we are back to, the crux of what we have discussed is basically, it is creating awareness in the ecosystem and actually picking the problem statement at the grassroots level and then building digital solution to address that. And that will help us drive efficiency.
That will solve the expense issue, the wastage issue, all those issues can be solved.
Thank you. Thank you for those insights. Now we'll do a quick rapid fire to wrap up this session. One common question to all of you and just one line response, if you may please. Imagine all of your organizations and we are all working in this, in driving digitization and IoT and energy efficiency equation. What is the index that you would create for your organization in order to drive and measure, digital efficiency, digital energy efficiency? So we can start with you, Venugopalji. And in the interest of time, just a one-line response.
I don't think I can, coming from government, I would say I have a particular index, but I would say my bets are in terms of, bringing something like UPI in Indian context, in the energy sector. So probably UI is what I would advocate for.
Thank you. Umesh?
The question is that how will we measure success?
Yeah, I mean, let's say for Zempla, we are selling, you are selling IoT solutions, asset management software. How would you measure your own digital energy efficiency?
I have a very bad sense of humor और मैं यहाँ पे उसको try करूँगा. So मुझे सबको घर जाना होता है, शाम को salary लेनी होती है, तो बेचना पड़ता है. And Damini, to your question, probably $100 million exit is good for me. I do that and I exit. That's an outcome that I would chase.
You have gone on the top line. 100 million तक पहुँचने के लिए I'm saying, how would you measure?
I think so. Just to hit the nail on the head, is the more we can, so one thing that we do, and there's a lot of content that Zempla publishes, both on YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere. We keep talking about the same thing. How do you, so Sir said, so it's a longer answer, I'll just finish in 30 seconds or 1 minute. One matrix that we often look at is don't sell to someone who's not ready to buy. Make them believe or understand why should they be buying, and then let them decide the vendor. That's our proposition. And that's also, by the way, a good way to remain poor. Because when you give people the option not to buy from you, they'll never buy from you. So,
thank you. Sumit-ji, anything from an
So
Indian
if I talk
Railways
of Indian
perspective?
Railways, if you talk of the KPIs, I suppose, and what one parameter which should be monitored, now it's a very difficult question, but this is my personal opinion that if you talk of the passenger segment, then talking of in terms of energy terms, you need to have the passenger kilometers per unit of energy consumption. But I don't think it has any relevance for the passengers as such. It is of relevance to the railways, that how they want to optimize their operations. So if I talk of the management side of railways, then yes, passenger kilometers per unit energy consumption would be a major KPI as far as passenger services are concerned. Coming to the freight services, so it could be net ton kilometer traveled per unit consumption. So now railways is working on these things. Already a lot of statistics, a lot of KPIs are there. But again, I mean, it's all statistics. So what the end use of that statistics is, I mean, I had been in railway board also in ministry, and we used to do planning and working on these statistics. But again, these statistics are normally, I mean, they're not based on the actual figures, the actual real-time data, and that is where IoT needs to pitch in. But again, understanding of that statistics, that do we really need those statistics? That is also which, I mean, we could get input from the entire country ecosystem. That actually what statistics do we require, what KPIs do we require, and how to get those statistics actually, I mean, the genuine figures of those. So I think, again, my entire thing goes down to one thing: please understand the end user
Logo ko
requirement.
kya
Make them
chahiye?
understand the end user requirement. Thank you.
Chandrasekhar ji, any concluding remarks from you?
Yeah, given the nature of the solution that IoT technology and digitization bring together, it's difficult to define a quantitative index. But I would say that the way we look at each and every solution, each and every use case, is how we are minimizing the pain points of the customer. So that's one common factor in every solution that we develop and we deploy. And very quickly, I think our company tagline is something that you started with: less is more. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. With this, I would like to bring an end to this session. I would want to thank the esteemed panelists for very insightful discussions. We discussed various issues around how to drive energy efficiency and productivity in today's world. The core and the crux of it is what Sumit highlighted, and I think most of our discussion was centered around that if we have to push for energy productivity in the country, if we have to push adoption of digitization, it is important that the work starts with the entire ecosystem, starting at the grassroots level, understanding the pain points, developing and customizing solutions to address those pain points, and then increasing and pushing adoption via that. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Satish ji. Thank you, AEEE, for this opportunity to moderate and chair this esteemed panelist and the discussion around digitization of energy efficiency. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a patient audience.